there's been a recent release of files at the end of May on the concentration camps and detention facilities dotted throughout Xinjiang province in China. And there's so much information. There's just a load of stuff. So let's get right into it. The documents that have been leaked contain over 2,800 images of detainees, 300,000 personal records of people who have been detained, 23,000 detainee records, and a dozen police instruction and training manuals. It's a huge amount of material, and the sheer volume of material makes it hard to say, oh, this is faked. You know, if you get 1 or 2 photos out, or 10 or 20 or 100 or 200, you can say, oh, yeah, it's fake.
Well, it's the same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop thing, where it's like, I imagine within this will probably be a lot of stuff that is less relevant or less sensationalized or less, or just less interesting. And it's like, well, if you're going to fake this, you would probably just try and make it so that it's just the juicy stuff gets leaked. Yeah. Whereas the fact that there will be a lot of redundancy in there makes it very likely that this is all...
Yeah, like the amount of man-hours that would go into creating this much material of any kind is ridiculous. This is a huge operation, and it's a state security operation to detain hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million Uyghurs in these camps. So, yeah, if we move on slightly. So, from 2017, the Chinese government detained over 1 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang in so-called vocational centers. Previously, witnesses and leaked state documents outlined the securitized nature of these re-education facilities, quote unquote. Now, the Xinjiang police files, a major cache of classified files from internal Chinese police networks, provides an unprecedented inside view. The files include thousands of images of detained Uyghurs, along with candid speeches by leading officials. They show leaders' impassioned demands to treat persons from ethnic groups like dangerous criminals and to readily open fire to stop escapees. And one of the units which has put this project and this website together, if we have a quick look, is these guys, Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. I'm glad someone remembers, because it ain't been taught in schools.
Yeah, it certainly is not.
Well, it is, but not as a compulsory module, not in the same way.
No, of course not. When I was in school, I wasn't learning about the Great Famine in China or anything like that, because I think China in particular are the ones with the highest body count, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to this, because you had the famine and the
Cultural
Revolution and other such things, which I think estimates are up to like 50 million people or something.
No, that's absolutely true. But following the death of Mao and the takeover of Deng Xiaoping, there was a feeling in the West that China was liberalizing, wasn't there? It opened itself up to Western capital.
I mean, I've seen some books alleging that Deng Xiaoping was a neoliberal of some form, which I find amusing, to say the least, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they did also have the Tiananmen Square massacre in, what, 1990?
Under Xiaoping, it was 89.
Was it 89? Same year as the fall of the Berlin Wall? I thought it was in the 90s.
No, it was in 1989, I believe. Okay. It was when the student protests were coming about, so because the students had noticed that there was a lack of democracy in this supposedly pure democratic state.
You're absolutely right.
Yes,
sorry,
and decided that what they wanted to do was protest in Tiananmen Square, right outside of, I think it's the Forbidden City, to make their voices heard. And of course, this pure, beautiful democratic state decided to silence the voices of the majority for good.
Yeah, absolutely. And that crackdown happened on the 4th of June, which is a controversial number in China to write, text, message, or even...
They still find, I think you still find the officials denying that it ever happened and just asking, what was the 4th of June? Nothing happened.
For example, Chinese exchange students just were totally unaware when they came to this country that this was even a thing. And so their immediate response, as they've been trained into, is often to say, oh, well, if a foreigner's saying it, it must be lies intended to smear China.
I know that you've come into personal contact and close encounters with a lot of Chinese exchange students as part of your university. Is that a personal experience that you've had bringing that sort of thing up?
Well, I mean, it's not like I sit down in the canteen with a Chinese
So what about that Tiananmen Square?
Yeah, exactly. But occasionally, very occasionally, it has come up, and the reactions are quite startling usually. But one of the really good things about this leak is that we have just tons and tons of files. So just keep scrolling down. There's 2,884 photos.
And these are all detainees?
Well, yeah. These are their photos taken as they're being detained. And it's it's really quite striking. It goes on and on and on. There's people of all age groups. There's people as young as the youngest I saw was 18, and this was in 2018 because that's when these photos are from.
I know that the Xinjiang province is one of the largest in China. It's absolutely huge. Was the reason for all of this detaining of the Uyghurs, is this purely as a attempt to stamp out the cultural the culture that they have there?
Well, this is the thing. The Chinese government claims that it's because... Well, what they claim is that this is happening because the Chinese are being threatened by Islamic terrorism and so on and so forth, because the Xinjiang Uyghur minority are ethnically Muslim. And there have been some terrorist incidents, although there is some debate as to what extent they were staged and to what extent
that's the thing.
they were...
When it's something that happens over here in the West, even though we do have a sort of thick layer of propaganda that everything's coated in, I do find it more easy to believe just because of the fact that we do have access to social media and other sort of decentralized aspects of communication to verify these things. When everything as it is in China is purely taken from the state by the state, it's very difficult to tell what's actually going on.
No, absolutely. And certainly, even if there's a small amount of separatism and extremism, imprisoning over 1 million people to deal with the problem is alarming by anyone's measure. But if we look, I've pulled out 5 slides. So this is Ehramjan Turgun. In 2018, he was 32 years old. He was undergoing re-education in this internment camp. We know where he was, and the reasons given. It's slightly garbled, but he listened to and watched illegal media, Taiblik. In April 1998, when he was 12 years old, he complained to his grandfather.
Oh.
Right. I'll read that again. In April 1998, when he was 12 years old, he complained to his grandfather. That's listed under the reasons for internment. That's
one of the list. Oh my goodness! I mean, this honestly does remind me when I was reading through the Cultural Revolution and some of the documents that they unearthed were saying that people had been arrested and sent to camps for something as simple as likes freedom. Literally, that was one of the things that was listed, and now it's gone all the way to complain to his grandfather.
We go to the next one. Again. 22 in 2018, re-educated in an industrial park, which implies he's being used for slave labour in a way, if that's the name of it, though I can't say for sure. Reason for internment, illegal study of economics.
Oh. Well, I'd be screwed.
Well,
wouldn't
exactly. I read this profile. I thought this is probably Uyghur Harry.
Yeah, potentially.
You got a license for that there study of economics?
Yeah, you got a license for that Rothbard book right there.
Yeah.
Man, Economy and State. That should just be state, and more state. Thank you very much.
If we go to the next one. Guzel Nur Aziz, 24 in 2018. Reason for internment, tuned in to watch illegal media.
I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. We go to the next one. Elijan Mehmetimin, 31 in 2018. Reason for internment, the classic picking quarrels and provoking trouble. Have you heard of this particular sentence in China?
I have not, but I can only imagine it means asking questions.
Well, it's a very flexible and useful charge that the Chinese police use, and basically means stirring up trouble, disrupting social harmony, being critical or negative, or just annoying a policeman, right? It's a very broad thing, and this is the one that Chinese dissidents often get caught up on, even if they can't find anything concrete. This is a really safe one to get people on.
Oh, of course. I mean, anytime you introduce a law that is as grey and vague as picking quarrels and provoking trouble, that also sentence length 10 years, I don't even know if that's the upper limits of what you can get sentenced for this, that has a potentially unlimited sentencing to it, that is something that is purely put in place by the state to give them a reason to arrest and detain whoever they want, whenever they want.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
At the end of the day, any of us on any particular day could be guilty of picking quarrels.
Absolutely, but you could say this is just the Chinese translation of causing great offence.
Exactly.
You know, the Chinese sort of slightly less sophisticated version of hate crime. Obviously, it's a very different thing, it's a different context, used in a different way. But that's why I get concerned about stuff like Section 127 and these things where people are banging on about hate crimes and causing offence and so on, because it's so vague that you can see it going down this road.
Well, this sort of thing is why I despise the idea that the whole slippery slope concept is a fallacy, because some people refer to it as a fallacy, purely because Section 127 is the first step on the path to these kinds of laws. I mean, it is this kind of law, just not policed as strictly as the Chinese are doing. It's the same reason why I'm terrified of things such as central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, and you should be too.
And yes, you should be. The Rishi Sunak's looking to introduce, because I see that purely as being the stepping stone, on a pretty big stepping stone as well, to our own version of a social credit system.
No, absolutely. If we go to the next one, so this is Zulpiyar Mahmood, 19 in 2018. And again, in the industrial park. Reason for internment, autonomous region integrated push. So that, reading the Chinese characters there, I think what that's saying, I don't speak Chinese, so I speak Japanese, is that essentially she was part of a group that was in favour of separatism.
Well, do you know the interesting thing? These sorts of states always do all of this sort of stuff purely in the name of democracy, don't they? It's something like the Democratic State of North Korea, Democratic People's Party of China, and such like that. When you actually go back and look at what the founding fathers of a great democratic state like the United States, for instance, believed, was they believed that part of democracy was the right to secede from a government if you believe that it was not serving the interests of the people, which supposedly should be its stated the reason it's there. And when you go this far, when you instill the government with the authority of the general will, all of a sudden secession, all that means is that you are against the will of the people. That means that you are against what we want.
No, absolutely. And so these rules for internment, reasons for internment, might seem slightly random. We'll get onto why that is a little bit later. But just before that, I want to show you an even rarer thing than these leaks, which is some actual journalism by the BBC.
What?
I know. This is actually a really good bit of work that they've done, where they've put together a visualization of what's been going on down there. And they just have some lines to lay out the authenticity of the document. These images can be verified. So this is a camp from satellite imagery, by being shown to contain real people identified as the missing relatives of a number of overseas Uyghurs approached by the BBC. The BBC has also been able to verify the spreadsheets containing the photographs, ID numbers, and cell phones for camp police officers. Although security personnel in Xinjiang are known to be under orders not to answer calls from overseas, after dialing the numbers listed for more than 150 police officers and government officials, several picked up and confirmed their names, roles, and respective offices. So they literally went phone jacker on the Chinese camp guards.
Fair play.
And the idiots actually picked up, which is hilarious. There's a transcript here, which I'm just going to read out. Hello, is that police officer name? Yeah, what's up? Are you the police officer who works at the Tokzak Township Police Station? Yeah, who are you? May I ask, have you worked at the Shufa Industrial Park Vocational Skills Education and Training Centres? Who are you? I would like to verify a piece of information with you. What do you want to verify? Who are you? I am the person who is calling you. What the expletive do you want to verify? And he hangs up. Now, I feel like the BBC could have been a lot cleverer with this.
Well, I mean, the fact that they've got this article out in the first place is impressive enough. You can't expect them to be too competent.
This is great. The fact they called up the numbers, fabulous. But they could have gone full phone jacker on this. I'm sure they were calling in Chinese and they had the right thing. They could have routed the call through Chinese numbers so it wouldn't tip anyone off that it was going through. They could have pretended to be someone who is believable. They could essentially have gone full social hacking and got a bit of information.
They could have gone all the way through with it and seen how much information that they could get.
Yeah, I mean, they just wanted to prove a point, which is this is a real person, and they did that. Fine, great, but the potential here. Now I imagine it's too late because they will be on high alert for suspicious phone calls.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese government have noticed that this article has been released in the first place, so they're going to be very alert.
They are somewhat in damage control mode. I haven't bothered wasting your time with the denials from Chinese officials and diplomats, because what's the point? We know they're lying through their teeth. But if we just have a look at this next slide here. So this is a map of confirmed camp locations by satellite. That's a lot of locations.
camps.
Obviously, you notice there's that big basin there, which is more or less a desert, I believe. So even though Xinjiang is a very large province, a lot of it is not particularly hospitable.
Wouldn't imagine so.
So China's narrative on all of this is that the Uyghurs in Xinjiang are Islamic terrorists. They use this allegation to justify what amounts to an ethnic cleansing program in the region, replacing the native Uyghur population with Han Chinese. China claims that the inmates are trainees or even sometimes volunteers, attending vocational courses and acquiring professional skills and legal knowledge so that they can live on their own profession. And from what we've seen of the details, these courses consist of being forced to chant propaganda slogans while you've got your hands handcuffed behind your back and you're forced into a kneeling position with everyone else. That's not education. It's not even brainwashing or propaganda. It's just torture. While nobody is alleging that there are gas chambers in these concentration camps, because people often make synonymous concentration camps and death camps, the systematic long-term incarceration of millions of people certainly qualifies as a cultural genocide. To use the quote, acts and measures undertaken to destroy nations or ethnic groups' culture through spiritual, national and cultural destruction. You could also call this ethnocide. From the UNESCO definition, ethnocide means that an ethnic group is denied the right to enjoy, develop and transmit its own culture and its own language, whether collectively or individually. This involves an extreme form of massive violation of human rights, Exhibit A, and in particular the right of ethnic groups to respect for their cultural identity.
And this is not something that is unique to China among communist states to do this. Before they committed the Holodomor, this was the sort of thing that Stalin's Russia and even Lenin's Russia was doing to Ukraine, where I think it was Russification was the process that they were trying to put it through, where they took down all of the Ukrainian signs, replaced them with Russian signs. All poetry and art had to be in Russian rather than Ukrainian.
They actually flip-flopped quite interestingly on that, because to start with, that was more like Imperial Russia's idea, that it wanted to Russify the provinces. When the Bolsheviks took over, initially for a period, they accentuated and emphasized the local culture like this, because they thought it would help to break down the national identity of the Imperial Russian state. But then, of course, once they consolidated their power a bit, they did exactly as you said, went back to Russification, turned up to 11.
Yeah, I think what they probably must have realized that was by allowing the Ukrainians to indulge in their own culture, it created feelings of separatism within the Ukrainian provinces, and therefore they had to stamp that out any way they could.
So we have BuzzFeed have also been reporting reasonably well on this, and just at the top here they have satellite imagery of a camp. If we just scroll through, and you can just see how it's developing. And they reckon that this camp holds 10,000 people.
So for those just listening rather than watching, the slides are showing the gradual development of the camp as it was being set out just as a plot of land, and then the actual buildings being built on it. And it looks like quite a large facility as well.
Yeah. Now, I say long-term. Obviously, long-term architecture in China is a humorous thing, but let's not get sidetracked. The recent leaks are not the first to emerge from China's prison camps, and a significant amount of information leaked in 2019 gives us a fuller picture of what's going on. So let's quote from this article. Exposed China's operating manuals for mass internment and arrest by algorithm.
Arrest by algorithm?
Arrest by algorithm. So I was saying before how the charges seem to be a little bit random.
They seem to be plucked out of thin air almost.
Yes. Well, this starts to reveal why.
So they're just chosen by an algorithm. Wonderful.
Yeah. I quote, "A new leak of highly classified Chinese government documents has uncovered the operations manual for running the mass detention camps in Xinjiang and exposed the mechanics of the region's Orwellian system of mass surveillance and predictive policing."
Full Minority Report here.
I'll say that again. Mass surveillance and predictive policing. The leak also features previously undisclosed intelligence briefings that reveal, in the government's own words, how Chinese police are guided by a massive data collection and analysis system that uses artificial intelligence to select entire categories of Xinjiang residents for detention.
So this is truly just a systemic method of rounding them each up one by one. I don't think anybody who is a part of this, who is a resident of this province, by the way that you're describing this, is going to be innocent in any sort of legal sense as part of the Chinese.
It's starting to sound a bit like the computer from V for Vendetta that we did that podcast.
It really is, actually, isn't it?
What was the name of it?
I've forgotten you did it with Carl.
I did, yeah. But no, it's really quite spooky. The manual, called A Telegram, instructs camp personnel on such matters as how to prevent escapes, how to maintain total secrecy about the camp's existence, methods of forced indoctrination, how to control disease outbreaks, and when to let detainees see relatives or even use the toilet. The document, dating to 2017, lays bare a behaviour modification points system to mete out punishments and rewards to inmates. So there's like an internal prison camp social credit system that they run.
So you, even when you've already been detained, you still cannot escape the social credit system.
No, absolutely not. This is full on like behavioural control, behavioural science stuff. It's really freaky.
And this is social engineering taken to its logical endpoint.
Yes, and it's terrifying, and you should be concerned about it. The China cables reveal how the system is able to amass vast amounts of intimate personal data through warrantless manual searches, facial recognition cameras, and other means to identify candidates for detention, flagging for investigation hundreds of thousands merely for using certain popular mobile phone apps. And there's actually a leaked drone clip that we're just going to play on mute here, so you can see what this actually looks like in practice. That's a load of people, by the looks of it, being loaded onto a train, or there's lines of police escorting prisoners who are huddled and chained together and handcuffed.
Massive chain, lots of large groups of people all being rounded up.
It's a large operation, isn't it? For a relatively rural province.
Yes, I mean...
And look at that.
And
they're all forced to wear these clothes and blazers, and they're kneeling down, they're handcuffed.
People say as an economic system, communism and socialism, whatever you want to call it, is very, very inefficient. And
blindfolded.
For a lot of things it is, but they're always fantastically efficient at rounding up the enemy, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what government by algorithm looks like in China. It's really quite spooky.
I think we've made it all very clear here that for the most part, I don't think anybody in the office is a particularly massive fan of Islam, but that does not excuse this kind of inhumane treatment that these people are being put through. I mean, for the most part, with a culture like whatever the Xinjiang province has, if they are if they leave everybody else alone, you leave them alone. That's
the thing which I also find staggering is the silence of the Islamic world on this issue.
That is a good point, actually.
Right? The Islamic world gets very jumped up about, for example, protests involving what's being shown on British cinema screens, and yet on this, it's crickets.
I can only imagine it's because they know that unlike our, let's be honest, weak-willed Western states filled with jelly-legged bureaucrats, the Chinese state would stamp down hard if anything, if any repercussions came to them as a result of this.
Yes, but it's also because, quite frankly, a lot of these Muslim states want to do business with China.
That's fair.
So there we go. So China has called these files fake as an attempt to just smear China. A number of CCP propagandists, particularly foreigners paid to be agents of Chinese state media, have come out of the woodwork to claim this is all fake and the Uyghurs are happily dancing away in Xinjiang province. I don't think you can dance very well with handcuffs and a blindfold. However, the amount of verification that has gone into analysing these papers, as I said before, from media and academic institutions across the world rather puts the authenticity beyond a doubt. The evidence all lines up, from leak files to phone calls to satellite images to geolocation and metadata. And we're just going to play a clip here that Serpent Today has put together. So he used to live in China, and he's a good authority on a lot of the rise of authoritarianism under Xi Jinping's regime. He speaks Chinese and so on. So there's just a short clip we're going to play. As it runs through, flicking through some of the training manuals and what they look like, the different PowerPoint tools. So
that's just presumably showing how to handcuff somebody properly.
Yeah. all
the
the different
incredibly
guidance.
militarized police force they've got over there.
Yeah,
How to restrain someone.
exactly. A lot of guns as well, surprisingly.
Not for the population, though.
No,
Never for the population.
no. So that was just a quick look at what these briefings look like. That's what's happening in Xinjiang, pretty much. It sucks. If you're worried about China invading Taiwan, though, that's probably not going to happen. We have an article from Rory talking about why that's massively jumped up. But it's bad times for Xinjiang, as it has been for the last 5 years, maybe 7 years, maybe 8 years. No one seems to care. We've got other things to do. We've got tweets to send, Instagram pictures to upload. But that's what's happening in 2022.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can become a member and find all of our premium content on lotuseaters.com, including the latest Contemplations, number 75, What Makes Good Art, which was a discussion between Bo and Josh. If you're interested in finding Josh on social media, you can find him on Getter at Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.